The glare of the television cameras was merciless, but Jericho Stone was used to it. As the CEO of UrbanSphere, a company that promised to revolutionize urban logistics with its groundbreaking AI, he thrived in the spotlight. He stood on a stage in the heart of his gleaming headquarters, a titan of industry in a perfectly tailored suit, his voice a smooth, confident baritone that commanded attention. But today, that confidence was a lie. On the massive screen behind him, a live feed showed a delivery van stuck in a hopeless gridlock. This was the public launch of Odyssey, his company's masterpiece, AI, designed to create the most efficient delivery routes imaginable, and it was failing, spectacularly, in real time. The AI's perfect route had led the driver into a newly formed construction zone that wasn't on any digital map. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. "Mr. Stone, this is the third failed demonstration. Can you tell us why your multi-billion-dollar AI is being outsmarted by a traffic cone?" The barely suppressed snickers in the room felt like 1,000 tiny needles against Jericho's skin. His jaw tightened. He had built his empire on the promise of flawless data, on the idea that human error was a problem to be solved by superior code. This public humiliation was more than a setback. It was an invalidation of his entire worldview. His gaze swept across the room, landing on a figure standing near the back, by the doors. It was a man he'd seen 100 times, a homeless man who often sought shelter near the entrance of the UrbanSphere Tower. He was old, with a wiry frame, a threadbare coat, and a calm, observant face that seemed to see everything. In that moment of searing frustration, Jericho saw not a person, but a symbol of the messy, unpredictable human chaos his AI was supposed to conquer. He did something he would later regret, an act of pure, unfiltered arrogance. He pointed a finger toward the man. "You see that man?" he boomed, his voice silencing the room. "He probably knows this city's alleys better than anyone. It's easy to walk a path. It's another thing to design one for an entire fleet." He then looked directly at the old man, his voice dripping with condescension. "Tell you what, I have the route that just failed right here. If you, in all your wisdom, can find a better path from this building to the delivery point, a path that beats our AI's best time, I will personally give you a key to this building, a permanent one." A wave of shocked murmurs and nervous laughter filled the room. His own team looked at him, aghast. It was a cruel, impossible challenge, designed to deflect his own failure by mocking the city's most vulnerable. He expected the man to shrink away, to disappear back into the shadows. But he didn't. The old man stepped forward, his movements slow but deliberate. He met Jericho's gaze, his eyes clear and intelligent, holding no trace of fear. His voice, when he spoke, was surprisingly steady, a low, gravelly hum that carried across the silent room. He said, "I don't need a key, son, but I will look at your map, because it seems to me your machines have forgotten that a city isn't made of data. It's made of pavement and people." The room went utterly still. Jericho Stone, the man who had an answer for everything, was speechless. He had intended to make a point, to use this man as a prop in his theater of power. But the prop had just spoken back, and his words held a weight that Jericho's billions couldn't seem to budge.
Jericho Stone's empire wasn't built on privilege, it was forged in fire. He grew up in a cramped apartment in Houston's 3rd Ward, the son of a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still struggled to keep the lights on. The world he knew was one of cracked pavement and the relentless hum of a city that promised much but gave little. From a young age, he understood that to escape, he couldn't just be good. He had to be perfect. He devoured books. He taught himself to code on a discarded library computer. He saw the world not as a place of people, but as a complex system of inputs and outputs. If you could just understand the code, you could control the outcome. While other kids were playing ball, he was designing algorithms in a tattered notebook, dreaming of a world where logic, not luck, determined your fate. That relentless drive propelled him out of his neighborhood and into a prestigious university on a full scholarship. He was a ghost on campus, never at parties, always in the library, his hunger for success a tangible force. He faced the quiet, cutting prejudice of a world not built for him. He was told his ideas were too aggressive, that he needed to learn his place. Instead of backing down, he built walls. He learned to be colder, sharper, more ruthless than anyone else in the room. He believed that emotion was a weakness and sentimentality was a fatal flaw. He founded Urbansphere with a single, radical idea: to create a city that ran with the perfection of a machine. His AI, Odyssey, was the culmination of that dream. It would eliminate traffic, streamline deliveries, and erase the messy, unpredictable nature of human movement. It was his answer to the chaotic world he had escaped. But success had a cost. The higher he climbed, the more detached he became. The boy who had memorized the cracks in his neighborhood's sidewalks now lived in a penthouse that looked down on the city as an abstract map. He saw his employees not as people, but as assets. He measured their worth in performance metrics and lines of code. That was why the homeless man's quiet defiance struck such a nerve. The man, Solomon, represented everything Jericho had fought to leave behind: poverty, unpredictability, and a reliance on simple analog knowledge in a digital world. When Jericho issued that cruel challenge, it wasn't just an act of arrogance. It was an act of rejection, a public disavowal of the world he came from. He was trying to prove, to himself as much as to the audience, that the past had no power over the perfect, logical future he was building. He saw the man's worn coat and weathered face, and he didn't see a person with a story. He saw a data point to be dismissed, a variable to be ignored. He had built his entire identity on the belief that men like that were relics left behind by the relentless march of progress he was leading. So as he stood on that stage, a flicker of his mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Don't you ever forget where you come from, Jericho. The ground is what holds you up." He had dismissed her words for years as simple sentimentality. But as the old man, Solomon, agreed to his challenge, Jericho felt a tremor of doubt, a terrifying crack in the foundation of the world he had so meticulously constructed. He had built an empire of glass and steel, but he was beginning to suspect he had forgotten all about the ground.
Solomon's world was measured not in square feet, but in footsteps. He wasn't always on the streets. He'd had a life, a real one. He'd been a bicycle courier for 30 years, a legend in the city's tight-knit community of messengers. Back before GPS, Solomon was the GPS. He knew every alley, every shortcut, every loading dock, every one-way street that drivers ignored after 6 p.m. He knew the city's rhythm, its breath, the way it swelled and contracted with the morning rush and the evening exodus. His wife, Eleanor, used to joke that he had a map of the city imprinted on his heart. They lived in a small, warm apartment filled with the smell of her bacon and the sound of jazz on the radio. They didn't have much, but they had a life rich with love and routine.
Solomon didn't just deliver packages. He delivered news. He checked on elderly clients. He was a thread in the city's human fabric. Then, in a single brutal year, it was all erased. Eleanor got sick, a swift and merciless cancer that devoured their savings and then their world. After she was gone, the grief was a physical weight. Solomon kept working, but the joy was gone. One day, a distracted driver ran a red light, and the city that had been his partner became his enemy. The accident shattered his leg and his career. With no wife, no job, and mounting medical bills, the apartment was the next thing to go. He ended up on the streets, another ghost in the urban machine. But unlike others who were broken by the fall, Solomon refused to shatter. He lost his home, but he never lost his dignity. He still had his mind, and he still had the city. He walked. Every single day he walked. It was his ritual, his purpose. He traced the old courier routes from memory, his feet finding the familiar paths. He observed the constant, subtle changes the official maps never recorded. The new pothole on 7th Street that slowed down traffic, the alley behind the old theater that was now a permanent shortcut, the way the delivery trucks for the downtown restaurants all used the same illegal parking spot between 10 and 11 a.m. He knew the city's rhythm, its breath, the way it swelled and contracted with the morning rush and the evening exodus. He saw Jericho Stone, the powerful CEO, as just another part of the city's complex ecosystem, a man who lived in the sky but seemed to have no idea what was happening on the ground. When Jericho issued that challenge, Solomon wasn't insulted. He felt the flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. He saw the flaw in Jericho's logic, the fatal arrogance of a man who trusts his own creation more than the reality it's meant to navigate. He knew why the AI was failing, because the AI had been taught to read a map, but it had never been taught to read a city. Walking into that room full of cameras and tailored suits didn't intimidate him. He had faced far worse than a rich man's pride. He had faced the cold indifference of a city that had taken everything from him. This was not a challenge to him. It was an opportunity to remind a man who lived in the clouds that all the important things still happen on the pavement, and on the pavement, Solomon was still the king. Jericho escorted Solomon not to the boardroom, but to the Odyssey War Room, a circular, dimly lit chamber where a holographic map of the city pulsed in the center of the room. A dozen of his top engineers, the architects of his failed AI, stood with their arms crossed, their expressions a mixture of resentment and morbid curiosity. "This is the route," Jericho said, his tone clipped. He tapped a console, and a jagged red line appeared on the hologram, tracing the path the delivery van had taken. The objective was a package delivery from this building to a pharmaceutical lab in the medical district. The AI calculated this as the fastest possible route. It failed. Solomon walked slowly around the hologram, his eyes scanning not just the red line, but the entire glowing cityscape. He didn't look impressed by the technology. He looked like a master chess player studying a board set by a novice. One of the lead engineers, a young, sharp programmer named Kenji, scoffed under his breath. "What's he going to do? Tell us to take a left turn we didn't think of?" Jericho shot him a warning glance, but the sentiment hung in the air. Solomon ignored him. He pointed a weathered finger at a specific point on the map. "Here, this is your first mistake." "That's the Crosstown Expressway," Kenji said defensively. "It's the most direct path." "Today is Tuesday," Solomon replied calmly. "On Tuesdays, the farmers market sets up 2 blocks from that exit. The spillover traffic creates a bottleneck that no satellite can see. Your AI sees a highway. I see a parking lot." A ripple of uneasy silence moved through the engineers. They started typing furiously, pulling up traffic data that was minutes, even hours old. Solomon continued,
his finger tracing a new path in the air, a path that seemed to wind through a labyrinth of smaller streets. You want to go east, but first you have to go north, for 3 blocks. Take Miller Avenue. Miller? Another engineer chimed in. That's a residential street. It's slower. The street is slower, Solomon agreed. But the path is faster. Miller lets you bypass the entire expressway backup. It leads to an old service alley behind the textile warehouses. It's not on your map, but it's wide enough for a van. That alley lets you out onto 14th Street, but on the east side of the train tracks. Kenji shook his head, a smirk on his face. That's impossible! The 14th Street crossing is closed for repairs. It's in our system. The car crossing is closed, he corrected him gently. But the pedestrian underpass next to it has been abandoned for years. The city never sealed the vehicle access ramps. A delivery van can fit through it. You come out a block from the medical district with no traffic. The entire room was now staring at him, their smirks gone, replaced with expressions of stunned disbelief. He was describing a hidden city, a network of forgotten paths and local secrets that existed only in the minds of those who walked the pavement. Jericho felt a cold dread mix with a spark of awe. His multi-billion-dollar AI, with its real-time data and predictive algorithms, was a blunt instrument. This man was a surgeon. Fine, Jericho said, his pride forcing him to see it through. He turned to his team. We'll run it. A live simulation. 1 van on the AI's route, recalculated for the new construction. 1 van on his route. He gestured to Solomon, unable to hide the skepticism in his voice. Solomon simply took a blank sheet of paper and a pencil from a desk. He didn't need a hologram. He began to draw, his hand moving with a steady, certain grace. The map of the city was already in his heart.
The war room felt less like a tech hub and more like a tomb. 2 large screens dominated the wall, each showing a GPS feed of a delivery van. On the left, Odyssey route. On the right, Solomon's route. Jericho stood with his arms folded, his face an unreadable mask. His engineers murmured amongst themselves, pointing at the screen on the right with a mixture of pity and scorn. Solomon's route looked insane. It zigzagged through neighborhoods the AI would have dismissed as inefficient. He's sending the driver into the warehouse district, Kenji muttered. There's no way that's faster. He's guessing. Solomon stood quietly in the corner, watching the screens, his expression calm. He wasn't guessing. He was remembering. The test began. The Odyssey van, in blue, shot onto the expressway, its route a clean, logical line. The Solomon van, in green, turned north, away from the objective, just as he had instructed. See, another engineer said, he's already losing time. For the first 5 minutes, the AI was winning. The blue dot pulled ahead, and a palpable sense of relief spread through Jericho's team. Their world still made sense. Logic was still king. Jericho allowed himself a small, internal sigh of relief. Then the blue dot slowed. It hit the traffic from the farmer's market, just as Solomon had predicted. On the screen, the dot turned from blue to yellow, then to a frustrating, stagnant red. Meanwhile, the green dot, Solomon's van, moved like a phantom. It navigated the residential street, then disappeared from the main map. The driver's voice came over the comms, filled with disbelief. I'm in an alley. It's tight, but it's clear. I'm bypassing the entire traffic jam. The engineer stared, speechless. Kenji's face was pale. The green dot reappeared on the map on the other side of the congestion, now miles ahead of the AI's van. It approached the 14th Street crossing. Okay, this is it, Kenji said, a last sliver of hope in his voice. He's going to hit the closed crossing and get stuck. The driver's voice came back, laced with awe. Sir, you're not going to believe this.
The underpass, it's open. The access ramp is clear. I'm going through. On the screen, the green dot vanished for a moment before reappearing a block from the destination. A few seconds later, a confirmation flashed on the screen. Delivery complete. The room was utterly silent. All eyes turned to the other screen, where the blue dot was still trapped in traffic, miles away. The AI's estimated time of arrival was now 27 minutes later. Solomon hadn't just beaten the AI, he had obliterated it. He hadn't used a single line of code or a single byte of data. He had used wisdom. He had used experience. He had used his ears and his eyes and his feet. He had used the knowledge that can only be earned by walking the ground. Jericho stared at the screen, the words "delivery complete" burning into his vision. His empire was built on the premise that he had all the answers, that his technology was infallible, and in less than 15 minutes, a homeless man with a paper map had proven him catastrophically wrong. Solomon finally broke the silence, his voice not gloating, but gentle. "Your machine knows the map, son, but it doesn't know the neighborhood." For the first time since he was a child, Jericho Stone had no response. The silence in the room was the sound of his entire world being rewritten.
When the engineers finally filed out of the war room, they didn't look at Jericho. They looked at Solomon, some with awe, some with a newfound humility. They left him and Jericho alone in the quiet blue glow of the holographic map. Jericho's mind was a storm. Every instinct told him to lash out, to reassert control, to find a flaw in what had just happened. But there was no flaw. There was only the undeniable, humiliating truth. He had been so obsessed with creating a perfect system that he had completely forgotten about the real world it was supposed to serve. He finally turned to Solomon, his voice stripped of its usual authority, leaving only a raw, quiet vulnerability. "How? How did you know all that?" "I didn't learn it, I lived it," Solomon said, his gaze fixed on the glowing city. "For 30 years I rode these streets. For the last 5, I've walked them. You look at this map and you see lines and grids. I see stories. I see the morning bakery truck that always double parks on Elm. I see the shortcut kids take home from school. I see the life that happens between the lines." Jericho exhaled, a sound that was part sigh, part surrender. He walked over to the console and with a single keystroke shut down the hologram. He wanted to see the man, not the map. "What you did today, you embarrassed me," Jericho admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Solomon shook his head slowly. "No, son, I didn't embarrass you. Your pride did. It's the heaviest thing a man can carry. It blinds you, makes you think you're looking down from a mountain when you're really just standing on a box you built yourself." The words struck Jericho with the force of a physical blow. He thought of his mother, of the neighborhood he'd fled, of the ground he had forgotten. He had built a box of glass and steel and called it an empire. He looked at this man, a man with nothing, who possessed a wisdom Jericho's billions couldn't buy. He saw the quiet dignity, the unshakable sense of self, and for the first time, Jericho felt a profound sense of shame, not for being proven wrong, but for how he had treated a man who deserved only respect. "I made you a promise," Jericho said, his voice quiet but clear. He pulled a key card from his wallet. It was a master key, one that could open any door in the building. He held it out to Solomon. Solomon looked at the key, then back at Jericho. He didn't take it. "I told you I don't need a key," he said. "A roof is a roof. What a man needs is purpose. You took that from me on your stage. You made me into a joke. The quiet accusation was worse than any shout. Then let me give it back, Jericho said, his voice earnest. He put the key away. Don't take a key, take a job. No, not a job, a position. I want to create a new department at this company, the Department of Human Intelligence. Its job will be to integrate real-world human experience into our AI, to teach our machines about the stories between the lines, and I want you to run it. Solomon studied Jericho's face, searching for the truth behind the offer. He saw the broken pride, but he also saw something new, a flicker of humility, the beginning of a profound change. The work will be hard, Solomon said, testing him. It will mean admitting that your perfect machine is flawed, that it needs to learn from the ground up. Then let's get to work, Jericho replied, a hint of his old fire returning, but this time it was tempered with a new, hard-won wisdom. Teach me how to read the neighborhood.
So here's the real lesson. The most valuable knowledge isn't always found in boardrooms or in lines of code. It's found in experience, in listening, in respecting the wisdom of those you might be tempted to overlook. The person you dismiss might hold the one piece of the map you're missing. If this story made you think, if it made you want to look a little closer at the people you pass by every day, then share this message. Because a little respect can unlock a wisdom that can change the world.